Okay, let's dive right into this. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for another explainer. Today, we're looking at something that affects every single one of us, whether you realize it or not, the places we live and how they're actually built. We're going to unpack the specific metrics for measuring the community impacts of new home developments. We'll see exactly how industry professionals track, report, and measure the spaces they create using some pretty rigorous standards.
Think about it for a second. Building homes fundamentally changes communities. You don't just drop 50 new houses onto a plot of land without creating a massive ripple effect. It completely alters local infrastructure, transit systems, the availability of green space, and even the local economy. Now, for a long time, developers could just sort of wave their hands and say they built a green or community-friendly neighborhood. But how do we actually measure a new neighborhood's footprint? We need a way to set up a macro-level focus that relies on hard facts, not just slick marketing speak.
Enter the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, or the SASB standards, which are now under the stewardship of the IFRS Foundation. Think of this as the ultimate accountant's toolkit for the infrastructure sector. What this framework does is honestly brilliant. It totally prevents greenwashing by forcing companies to utilize rigid, verifiable data. We're talking about exact hectares, unit counts, and highly specific infrastructure checklists to measure the true community impacts of a project. It literally takes the guesswork out of sustainable building.
Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, measuring community impact. Second, tracking infill deliveries. Third, defining compact developments. Fourth, calculating average density. And finally, 5, the big picture. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, measuring community impact. Let's look at the why behind all of this. According to the standards, thoughtful community and urban planning brings real economic growth and workforce opportunities to an area. It helps moderate cost of living increases and, provides safe, vibrant neighborhoods for us to actually live in. But here's the massive warning label. If developers ignore these factors and build communities that overburden existing transportation or utilities, they run into some serious financial risks. In fact, permitting delays can sometimes cost developers thousands of dollars a single day. We're talking about severe permitting delays, excessive costs for new infrastructure, and intense community opposition. So measuring these impacts isn't just good for the earth, it's absolutely critical for the bottom line.
Moving right along to Section 2, tracking infill deliveries. This is all about where we choose to build. To really understand infill, I want you to imagine a city as a giant patchwork quilt. Infill development is strictly about where you build. Instead of expanding the fabric outward at the edges, which, as you know, requires building brand new roads and extending pipes out for miles, infill is more like repairing a hole in the existing quilt. You're taking vacant or underutilized lots of land that are already served by existing physical installations. Now, if you're a builder reporting this metric, you can't just guess. You have to verify that some very specific infrastructure boxes are checked. The site absolutely must be vacant or underutilized. It's got to have existing roads and power lines, and it must have existing sewer and water connections. Interestingly, these can also include brownfield sites, which are properties complicated by potential contaminants, or grayfield sites, which are previously developed areas with lots of impervious surfaces. Think of an abandoned strip mall, for example. As long as they have that existing infrastructure, they count as infill.
So how is this actually put on paper? It's a strict two-step process. First, the entity reports the total number of controlled lots located on infill sites. And just a quick clarification here, controlled lots include all lots owned or contractually available for ownership, like through an option contract, at the end of the reporting period. Step 2 is reporting the actual number of homes delivered on those sites. And under the SASB standard, homes cover single-family units, whether they're completely detached, attached like a townhome, or part of a multifamily residential building, the whole shebang.
Okay, Section 3, defining compact developments. This is where we shift to how we build.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the clear contrast. While we just established that infill sites are strictly geographic, it's where you build to utilize existing infrastructure. Compact developments dictate how you build. This concept is entirely focused on the structural layout, the density of the units, and the mixture of different uses within the neighborhood itself.
The SASB framework actually recognizes 3 distinct types of compact developments. The first is a cluster development. This is where a developer intentionally groups residential lots tightly together on specific portions of a site. And why do they do that? So the rest of the site-sensitive lands, like wetlands or forests, can remain completely undisturbed as open space. The second is mixed-use development, which integrates homes right alongside offices and shopping. And the third is the traditional neighborhood development.
I actually want to read this exact definition straight from the source material for that third type because it paints such a specific picture. A traditional neighborhood development is defined as a development that has mixed uses and housing types to create communities built for walking, and ideally allows residents to walk to shops, schools, places of worship, parks, and eventually transit stops. It's an idyllic goal, isn't it? Moving away from all that car-dependent sprawl and getting back to neighborhoods where your daily life can just happen on foot.
Which brings us nicely to Section 4, calculating average density. Time for a little bit of math.
So the absolutely crucial point here is this single metric, units per hectare. This right here is the gold standard for proving a development's true density. You can't just throw up a billboard claiming your new mixed-use neighborhood is compact. You have to show the math, definitively proving the density of homes delivered based on the land area.
Let's actually walk through this calculation step by step. The top half of our equation, the numerator, is super straightforward. You simply count the number of residential units in the compact development. And the rules clearly state this includes all units, whether they are planned, currently under construction, or fully completed. But step 2, dividing by the net neighborhood residential site area in hectares, well, that is where the real accounting magic happens. The denominator is highly regulated.
When you're calculating that net area denominator, you obviously include the total land devoted to residential facilities. You can also include areas the developer voluntarily gave up for an easement that prevents future development, maybe for tax abatement or just good community design. But, and this is massive, you must exclude pre-existing protected wetlands and other biodiverse sensitive areas where authorities already prohibit building. This is absolutely vital. You cannot penalize a developer's density score for leaving a pre-existing wetland alone, because, well, they weren't allowed to build on it anyway. It ensures the math reflects the developer's actual design choices on the buildable land.
Finally, Section 5, the big picture. Let's zoom out a bit.
And this brilliantly illustrates why these standards exist in the first place. By thoughtfully utilizing infill sites in compact developments and actually mathematically proving it through SASB standards, developers aren't just hugging trees, they are heavily mitigating their financial risks, they reduce the friction of permitting, they mitigate the intense community opposition that halts so many projects in their tracks, and they create walkable, efficient spaces that moderate the cost of living. Ultimately, this drives massive target market demand. People want to live in well-planned, sustainable communities, and investors for sure want to fund them.
So, it leaves us with this final, somewhat provocative thought to consider the next time you drive past a construction site. Are we just building sprawling liabilities, pushing our infrastructure to the breaking point? Or are we going to use hard data and strict metrics to craft sustainable, truly accountable communities? The tools and standards are clearly there for the taking. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope you leave today eager to see how these specific standards are applied in the real world, and maybe, just maybe, in your very next project. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.